Thanks for being here tonight. I'm Katie, and here's what I know. Your 2025 doesn't get to write the script for your 2026. Tonight, we're talking about making deliberate change instead of leaving your financial future to chance, because the only difference between those two things is a plan and the guts to act on it. So you might be thinking, who am I to tell you what to do with your money? My name is Katie Wesney. I'm the head coach at Enable Me. I'm a qualified financial advisor and chartered accountant who spent over a decade helping smart people close the gap between knowing what to do with their money and actually doing it. Tonight, we're making that happen for you. In the background, I have an amazing producer, Amelia. If you have any questions, please pop them in the question box above or below, depending on your settings. She will collate those along with the questions you've already submitted, and we'll go through them together at the end. No question's a silly question. Ask me anything, and I will try and help. And the session will run for 45 minutes. I will talk at pace. I'll try and cover the bulk of the content for you in 30 minutes, and then we'll spend that last 15 minutes going through those individual questions. If you get pulled away for any reason or you're desperate and want to watch it again, we will be sending you out a recording tomorrow morning. So in terms of agenda, we'll take some time to reflect on 2025 and plan for the new year. We'll be previewing what's ahead in the money world for 2026 in the backdrop of New Zealand's economy. We'll be getting into the nitty-gritty around strategy in terms of what we believe the pillars of financial success and how important it is to get the basics right. We'll talk through how debt holds us back and how to prioritize it in terms of tactics, and we'll just be generally cutting through the noise. First off, a wee disclaimer. This presentation is provided for information purposes only. The content of this presentation is not intended as a substitute for regulated financial advice. I'd love to give you personal advice tonight, but I can't. I don't know you, your numbers, or what's actually keeping you up at 3 a.m. worrying about money. At the end, I will share how you can book a one-on-one session with me or my team at a special rate. So, no doubt, like me, your 2025 had wins and losses. Write them both down, then decide which habits deserve a seat in 2026 and which ones get left at the door. The past is fixed, but your response to it isn't. So mine it for lessons and move on. We've got a saying at Enable Me where we're all constantly drawing lines in the sand and we're moving on to affect change, and we are controlling what we can. And I'd like to take a wee litmus test of the audience in terms of your confidence going into 2026. So how confident are you feeling? Not at all, slightly, moderately, very extremely. So if you could take a second, first one that springs to mind. Okay, so we'll just wait for those poll results to pop up. Okay. So most of us are feeling moderately or slightly confident. That is good news. And I love for those few people who are feeling very confident. That's awesome. And hopefully, as part of an output of this session tonight, you will be feeling more confident in the things that you should focus on into 2026 that's really going to affect change for you and your family. And I do think it's important to begin 2026 intentionally when it comes to your financial goals. There will be opportunities this year, and it's up to you to put yourself in the best position to harness these opportunities. And I really do believe having a solid financial plan that lays out where you want to go helps you identify these opportunities and assess whether you're on the right path according to your personal circumstances and goals. And lots of people often they kind of sometimes they kind of slink into my room and they're like, oh, there's a little bit of shame, or I'm not very good at money, this isn't my bag. And if I can be honest with you, I could care less about your starting point. It's, again, understanding what you're capable of achieving, and we start today and we make tweaks, and it's that trajectory forward that really matters. And in terms of that outlook for 2026, in terms of the economy, commentators are cautiously optimistic about an economic recovery at long last. So the Property Pulse research projects an average rise of 5% in terms of property prices in 2026. The Reserve Bank expects inflation to fall to 2% at last by mid-2026. And again, we've got forecasted GDP growth of 3% in 2026. Economists are optimistic about the labour market, wages, and more favourable bank lending. Just being a little bit more consistent, knowing where we're at this year. So what that tells me is there are opportunities to be taken in 2026. You just need to be ready. And I think it's really important in terms of strategy not to get distracted by noise. And I glanced at the headlines of the news and the weather and what's happening, with Trump, etc. And it does make you feel sad and uncertain. And it's election year here in New Zealand, which again creates more uncertainty. Don't let that be your excuse for not taking action. If you are waiting for things to be more certain, that time likely will never happen. And again, there are opportunities now. Put yourself in the best possible space to take advantage. So we're going to start tonight with the basics. Don't overlook the importance of strengthening your financial foundations. Often the things we think are simple are the most important to get right before we start tackling the more complex. And financial success, it's really not built on one clever investment move. It's built on 7 unglamorous, for want of a better word, pillars working together. You need all of them, not just the sexy ones, because skipping cash flow management just to focus on KiwiSaver, it's kind of like building a penthouse on sand. All of these pillars need to work together to maximize where you land. We don't leave any stone unturned in terms of making your foundation as solid as possible. And for most people, you are your biggest obstacle. For the vast majority of people, you don't have a plan, you don't know what you're capable of, and in the absence of not knowing, often you just do what you've always done, hoping for the best. And to fix that and get that bespoke plan in place that actually works, first things first, you need to understand who you are and who you're not, along with your partner, if your money is combined. Honestly, the best plan in the world will not work if it doesn't work with who you are. And in our mind, firstly, we get to understand that money personality. So you're either a shopper, a plotter, or a saver. Shoppers derive emotional satisfaction from shopping. I can have a pension for shopping, or you're a saver, so you derive emotional satisfaction from saver, or you're a plotter. Don't particularly enjoy shopping, but you're not super great at saving. So somewhere in between. And in terms of how that affects how we operate around money, a saver is generally good at amassing cash. They're generally not great at growing it. And again, you've got to understand how that dynamic works with your partner. So, a shopper and a shopper, generally, you look great. You're not necessarily making the financial progress you deserve. Shopper and a saver, generally, there's a little niggle around money. Cuter in the beginning, 10 years in, heading for divorce. No, kidding, jokes. And when you've got a plotter in the room, in terms of that mix, generally just drifting, not doing what you should in terms of capacity. So again, understanding that that will reflect on the levers we pull in terms of how we get you to do what needs to be done. So for a shopper, generally speaking, for example, you need goals that are sexy enough or motivating enough for you to try harder in terms of maximizing your position. So just to tell you to save is really hard. That isn't going to excite you. But to say, well, if we did X and Y, potentially we could buy another property, well, that's shopping in a way on steroids, and that is very motivating for you. So again, really important to know how you operate around money. We also need to understand your starting point from a cash flow position. And lots of our clients start in every single different parameter. Some are sinking, so there's not enough income to cover the outgoings, and we course correct really quickly on that. And some people think that if they can cover the minimum payment on their credit card, they're floating. In our mind, if you can't repay that credit card in full, you are sinking. And again, we need to course correct sooner rather than later. Vast majority of my clients are floating, so they're just drifting along. They're fine, but they are not making the financial progress they deserve. And where we want to get you to is flying, which is saving or having a cash surplus of 15 to 20% of what you earn, in effect, to grow wealth, to pay off debt, etc. That's what we want to get you to. And again, lots of my clients are flying. I want you to fly higher. And again, layer that in terms of how you approach risk and strategy. Some people are safety conscious, so money under the mattress. Some people are very adventurous, entrepreneurial, and sometimes we have to pull them back. And some people are dreamers. And I don't think anyone on this call is being a dreamer because you're here tonight wanting to affect change. But understanding what is appropriate for you is really important as we design a plan that speaks to you, but that you will take action on. And again, you need to know this in terms of what strategies we put in place that will actually move the dial going forward. So, to be clear, as we start to make progress, cash is the engine room of your financial plan. A cash surplus, sadly, doesn't magically appear. You engineer it by tracking against where you would like to be spending your money. We've got a great app, MoneyFit, that helps our clients do that. You set up really great systems that work on autopilot. Lots of our clients set up separate bank accounts in terms of just understanding where their money is going, and we don't use credit cards. And it's being ruthlessly honest about your non-negotiables versus your fritter. Build in the things that matter most so you actually stick to the plan. When I think about examples for me, it would be my kids' education and activities and travel. For my husband, he loves travel and gadgets. Then eliminate the mindless spending and make damn sure you're getting paid what you're worth. All of those things ensure that you increase what's left over, and then we use that as strategically as possible to reduce debt and grow wealth into the future. And in terms of maximizing that surplus, I just touched on this very briefly, but to be clear, on average in New Zealand, we fritter 15% of our net income. A little bit of overspending, a lot of paying too much interest if we have debt, and not executing on a strategy that's going to get us ahead. And what I mean by fritter I always use this example with my clients. First cup of coffee of the day, I am riding that caffeine wave, lots of bang for my buck. Second cup, not quite good as my first, but still pretty good. Third cup, I tend to feel a bit sick. So my optimal level of coffee drinking is 1.5 cups. Anything over and above that, I'm just doing it because no reason not to. For Kiwis, a lot of that is around discretionary spend. So it's takeaways, extra trips to the supermarket. It's fixed costs in terms of subscriptions that we're not auditing. And often, if you have a mortgage, it is not structured efficiently to mitigate interest. And often we pay too much for utilities and bank fees. So part of my job when I work with my clients is to find that kind of leaky bucket in terms of fritter to shore it up, to make sure that yes, you live a good life, and we make sure that there is money left over that is really impactful in terms of moving forward. And again, we've got to really understand the goals that are motivating and what you want to achieve. That's really, really important. And for most of my clients, they have very, very different goals, but in essence, those goals relate to two things. They want financial freedom, so a little bit more choice around the work they do, how long they work for, and they want security. They do not want to worry about money. So we understand your goals, we put numbers around them, but we ensure that we shape and we craft your money so that we set up really great systems that ensure you make progress. No one can rely on just willpower to be good with money. And again, you just want to live your best life and make sure that everything is what it should. Everything is where it should be and it's doing what it should in terms of maximizing your position. So important. And now, what you're going to do with that cash surplus or the money that's accumulating every month, firstly, if you have short-term debt, we're going to prioritize that. Stop using credit cards. I can hear those people in the audience saying, well, I pay it off in full. I get points. I'm winning. We know that regardless of whether you pay it back or not, people spend about 15% more than they would otherwise just because on credit, just because it's a less transparent form of payment. You know, you swipe your card, have I paid? Who knows, who cares? And you just again don't make the progress you deserve. Try and get that interest rate down and pay it off. That may be exploring a balance transfer to another bank, but you gotta change up your strategy that got you into debt in the first place in terms of structure, etc. Separate bank accounts, not using credit card in the future, and having those goals. Otherwise, that surplus just will be gobbled up before you know it. And similarly, we want to pay off long-term debt as fast as we can. I always get asked, should I invest or pay off my mortgage? My honest answer is ideally, I'd like you to do both. But again, non-negotiable that you have a really good, solid debt reduction strategy in terms of your mortgage. It is one of your biggest cash outflows, likely. Once it's gone, that's a whole lot less pressure and cash flow to further grow your wealth. So for most of my clients, we attack debt first with the view of using the equity we're creating to grow wealth as soon as we can. And non-negotiable that we get you mortgage free before retirement. Really hard to be paying a mortgage in retirement. Again, just less choice going forward. And very impactful in terms of the interest that you pay into the future. And for most Kiwis, we pay off our mortgage over the standard 30-year term. If we do that, it is not year 15 that you start paying back more principal than you do interest. Generally, it's the first 23 years, if you go on that standard trajectory, that you will be paying more interest than you do principal with every repayment. What that means to us is if you are frittering, $1 of fritter costs you $2 in interest. And I'm really interested in finding that and you putting that to better use, because again, that just gives you a whole lot more choice going forward. And again, as you increase the cadence of repaying debt, you're creating more options in terms of equity to tap into to buy potentially another property into the future to grow wealth. And just a wee example in terms of impactful numbers, the difference between paying off a mortgage in 15 versus 30 years. 30 years you pay 510,000 in interest. If you can repay it in 15 years, you pay 231,000. If you pay it off within 10 years, you only pay out, well, only, you pay 148K in interest. So the potential saving there in terms of having a really crisp structure to pay off debt, you've got 362,000 more in your back pocket that you do not have to pay back to the bank. So again, really important in terms of options and maximizing that trajectory going forward. And again, there's lots of options in terms of the way that you can structure or look at debt into the future. Lots of my clients come and we are simply refixing lending, etc. But again, we want to optimize that, and I'm going to talk to that soon. So that's when you are fixing on a particular term at a particular rate. If you do have the opportunity to refinance because the majority of your lending is coming off its fixed term and you're looking to switch banks, I strongly encourage you to look at that. I had a client yesterday who I saw who just refixed. I think they had 800,000 worth of lending coming up, and they're like, we just couldn't be bothered. But then 800,000 in my mind refinanced to another bank, they would be paid a 1% cash back at present in terms of that lending. That's a significant sum in my mind to put against interest you pay into the future, again, just to help alleviate pressure and also make more progress. Or you can simply restructure at a current bank. So your lending comes off your a term, and you can split it and do other things with it. You might put some floating, some fixed, etc. For my clients, I am very clear in terms of how I would like them to structure it going forward. And there was an ordering around debt reduction. And this is really important to clock in terms of wealth creation. There is productive debt and non-productive debt. We always prioritize that non-productive debt first. So non-productive debt, when we're talking about homes, is generally your home mortgage because there's no tax deduction associated with that. So I always want to prioritize that first. If you have your family home and a rental property and your family home has a mortgage, I would strongly suggest that we prioritize paying off that home debt and having a look and potentially having that investment property on interest only. That means that you maximize the tax deductibility associated with this and you have more cash flow to pay off that home mortgage faster. And again, at Enable Me, we're very clinical around what that looks like. One of the tools that we have for our clients is we have a mortgage optimization calculation written by one of our professors at the University of Auckland. It's like 8 pages of calculus. Most people's eyes glaze over at this point. But essentially what it does is it cuts that mortgage into savings or debt reduction goals. So every year you have a piece coming off that fixed term that we can attack in terms of additional progress. And my preference for my clients is generally to use a revolving credit to do that. And that revolving credit generally equates to what they can save in a calendar year or offset in terms of savings. And again, I like a revolving credit. Why is that? Any surplus funds you can offset debt immediately, but you can reaccess it going forward. So again, if you have savings and debt, highly likely I'd like them to be offsetting on the proviso that you can reaccess it going forward from an interest efficiency perspective. So getting that mortgage strategy right, really critical. Honestly, I think we obsess around interest rates as a nation. what's more important than interest rates is the pace that you pay it off. That's what we focus on. Again, quite easy to control the controllables. If we're, again, not worried about interest rate, we're worried on strategy and what actually affects change. And again, we graph, because I'm an accountant, in terms of what a difference that early repayment can make. So again, that green line it is 55 and you're going to be mortgage free at 65. So average Kiwi, which means that on average, your KiwiSaver, so you get mortgage free by 65, great, but you can't eat your house. You've got a KiwiSaver balance, and that runs out at 69. Short, happy life in retirement in terms of having to do something else or your hand being forced. In my mind, if we can get you mortgage free faster in terms of baseline, it means that we can save faster thereafter, which means that you run out of money at 80 compared to 55. Really important in terms of improving trajectory. Are we just focusing on paying off a mortgage? Certainly not. And to be honest, there is a cost to just focusing on one thing in terms of opportunities going forward. For most of my clients, again, they look at property or funds to grow wealth. Again, whatever speaks to their plan. But if their gap is more than 350,000 in terms of being sorted for retirement and living a good life, very likely one of the levers we will pull will be to look at whether it's the right thing for them to buy a investment property in terms of tapping into that equity they're creating. The cost of potentially not doing that is that equity just sits there doing nothing, and you don't have an appreciating asset through that next cycle. So again, lots of options. What is the right option for you? But there are fundamental levers that you pull to get yourself ahead, regardless of what's happening in terms of elections, regardless what's happening at interest rates, inflation. These are the levers we pull to get you ahead. And in terms of life stages, very generically, your 20s are for starting out, your 30s for getting on the property ladder, your 40s and 50s for growing wealth, and your 60s for finally living off it. Except life doesn't follow a neat timeline. It really doesn't. We get curveballs. And again, for some of my clients, illnesses, relationship breakdowns, they're at the beginning. They've got to get to the same place as everyone else. We have to be strategic in terms of what comes next. We can't leave anything to chance. And I think that's why you just can't just obsess over one thing. Property, KiwiSaver, you need every part of your financial life to be optimized. You need good insurance and again, to make sure that when the hits the fan, which likely it will at some point, you've shored up the ship so it doesn't capsize, that you can right yourself in terms of still inching forward. And I think that's just so important in terms of when life throws you a curveball, you've got options instead of panicking. And yeah, I just, this never has felt so real to me as it did in March and April 2020. I've always worked really closely, for whatever reason, with lots of pilots, etc., who were almost all belonged, etc., that hard time around COVID. But we had such rich conversations, no income, etc. But I was so proud of them that they had done what they needed to do up to that point. They knew their numbers inside out, and they knew what they had to do to affect change going forward. They knew how much their money would last. They had great insurance, and they had good buffers. And again, you can't affect what happens to you really into the future in terms of these curveballs, but you can affect what you do every day in terms of making really positive changes that will be really impactful to you and your family going forward. And I am not denying there is lots of noise out there. And I know that noise makes you worried, worry makes you distracted, and distraction honestly makes you super complacent. And change your narrative, change your financial future. And again, you have the power to make 2026 what you want it to be. But knowing all of this is just not helpful. You've got to anchor it to action. That is the thing that moves the dial going forward. I really encourage you to ignore the noise. It really only holds you back. And I know everyone's better than that. And you prove it to your future you believe that too. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And we challenge you to make one change that will help shape your finances in 2026. And for some people, that change might be speaking with a financial coach like myself to, again, help you get that full picture of your finances, to identify inefficiencies, because that's sometimes hard to see, and to really improve that default trajectory in terms of mortgage reduction or growing wealth at a faster pace. Property funds don't care. But again, you've got to do something. And again, there are rules around all of this. You understand them, you execute on them, and your trajectory, it will just shift. So you've spent the last 30 minutes learning what to do. Now comes the part that actually counts, the doing of it. So if you want support turning tonight's strategy into your actual plan, we're offering one-on-one coaching with our team. It's usually 400, but we have discounted it to $100 if you book tonight, being January the 21st, 2026. Pardon us. See, we haven't changed that. We're stuck in 2026. So that's January 21st, 2026. If you're watching a recording of this, you can still get a discount. That discount will be $149 if you if you reach out after that date. Just scan that QR code, or you go to enable.me/change versus chance, and you decide if 2026 will be a better year. Decide. So we've got loads of questions. We've had some awesome questions submitted. I have Amelia in the background. Amelia, hit me.
Right. Thank you to everyone who submitted their questions. The first question we have, any advice on getting rid of credit card debt in 2026?
Oh, speaking my language. Stop using the credit card immediately. Look at doing a balance transfer to another institution, bank, to lower the interest rate, to buy yourself some breathing room, and throw every spare dollar at the debt. Isn't sexy, but it's the fastest way out.
Right. I am wondering, so this person, I am wondering if I should buy my first home this year. I am a bit put off because it would be a big financial stress to make the repayments. Do you have any recommendations for me?
Mm. And I think that in terms of first home buyers, genuinely, there are opportunities in this market. Caveat being, if the repayments would genuinely stress you out, likely you're not ready yet. Buy when you can afford the mortgage plus a buffer for life's curveballs, not when you're stretched to breaking point. So if you know your numbers and you're comfortable, go ahead and buy that home. Great timing. But again, if the numbers aren't stacking up and you're feeling stressed, then likely you need to pause and work on that deposit, and then you execute as soon as you can thereafter. Great question.
Next question, any advice for someone who wants to save money but still be able to enjoy life?
So important. And I always say to my clients, you actually can't have a plan that's just based around deprivation. No one sticks to it. I know that, you know that. So, what I would say is automate your savings or goal first, so the money just disappears before you spend it, and ensure you incorporate those non-negotiable costs that we talked about in terms of, and for most of my clients, we say, well, at least kind of three non-negotiables, which means that you're still living your best life and you can maintain momentum, and everything else we channel as productively as possible. Really important.
We just have a question that came in. This person said, I'm torn between paying more money off my home mortgage versus putting more money into KiwiSaver. They say that they're
Ah,
close to retirement.
ah, that is a really good question. And close to retirement, I'm going to presume, let's say in the next 5 years, close to retirement, I would be prioritizing paying off that debt as fast as possible. Really important to be contributing to KiwiSaver, certainly to maximize your employer contribution. And again, I don't know your circumstances and I'd have to go through the numbers, but all things equal, if you had 5 years, I'd say, please let's just get rid of that mortgage ASAP. That will just give you more choice thereafter. Absolutely keep contributing to KiwiSaver to maximize that employer contribution. Um, yeah, but again, to really know, I'd have to lift under the hood in terms of your specific situation.
Right, and then our next question, how do I calculate how much I need to save for a comfortable retirement?
Such a good question because it really does differ. And where I always start with my clients is that we figure out, well, what does a good life look like to you? What does it cost you? Because in effect, we need to be kind of growing that asset position to a point that feeds that when you're no longer working. Everyone has a different number. We understand yours and we execute on a strategy around that.
Someone just asked in the chat,
Mm.
can you still eat away at your mortgage sooner, even if it's all on fixed?
Such a great question. And for most of my clients, when they initially come to me, their mortgage is very vastly, it's fixed. And you can, depending on bank you're with, you can chip off a piece. But for lots of my clients, we will say, well, if you are capable of saving more, potentially we break off a piece of a fixed term. Again, we have to calculate if that's in your best interest because there'll be a wee, could be a wee break fee associated with that. But often, if it is in your best interest, we could just chip off a piece of that fixed term, pop it in a revolving credit, and that potentially could be the goal that we aim for in terms of paying off the debt faster. And again, often if you have debt and just savings languishing, doing very little, generally the math is really works in your favor to be able to offset those savings against the debt on the proviso that you can reaccess it going forward because it's a non-negotiable to me that you have a really good buffer. But again, want to know your individual numbers, etc., to get that absolutely right. But those are the things you need to be thinking of.
All right, our last question. What is the first money action to take for 2026? What are some habits? Oh, so this was combined with another question. What are
Okay.
some what are some habits that we can put into practice today?
Yep. So if there was one thing I would want you to do other than coming to see me, I would say automate one thing today, whether it is savings transfer or debt repayments, because relying on willpower alone is how good intentions die. So automate your goal.
That's great. Sorry we can't get to everyone's questions. If you have any questions about what we do, feel free to email us or give us a call tomorrow. Our contact information is on our website. Katie, I'll let you close off.
Amazing. So thank you for coming along tonight. I hope you got lots out of it. Really encouraging you to take action, make 2026 your year. Take care.